The howling winds of a Montana winter rattled the walls of the rickety shed. But it wasn't the cold that made Hannah Prescott's teeth chatter, it was fury. Betrayal burned in her chest hotter than any hearth fire as she paced the dirt floor, her fine riding boots leaving imprints in the dust. 6 hours she'd been trapped here, locked away by a man she'd thought she could trust. Montana Territory, 1878. Hannah had come west to escape the suffocating constraints of Boston society and her father's plans to marry her off to a business associate 3 decades her senior. At 22, she'd inherited enough from her grandmother to purchase a small piece of land outside the growing settlement of Wolf Creek. Independence had been her goal, respect her ambition. "Let me out, you spineless coward." Hannah shouted for what must have been the 100th time, her voice growing hoarse. She kicked the wooden door again, wincing as pain shot through her toes despite the protection of her boots. Maxwell Thornton, the banker who'd seemed so helpful when she'd first arrived, had shown his true colors when she refused his advances. He'd lured her to his property under the pretense of discussing a loan for farming equipment, only to lock her in the storage shed when she'd spurned him yet again. "You'll reconsider my proposal by morning, Miss Prescott," he'd sneered through the door. "A woman alone has no business owning property. It's not proper. It's not safe." Hannah's fingers traced the small derringer hidden in her skirt pocket, a gift from her grandmother, along with a stern warning about men's intentions. Unfortunately, the gun wouldn't help against a padlocked door. Night had fallen hours ago. The temperature had dropped drastically, and Hannah had been forced to burrow under a pile of burlap sacks to maintain some warmth. Her stomach growled painfully. She'd missed dinner, and tomorrow's breakfast seemed a distant dream. A sound outside made her freeze, not the wind this time, but the distinct crunch of boots on frozen ground. Hannah tensed, heart racing. Was it Thornton returning to gloat? She grabbed a rusty pitchfork leaning against the wall, prepared to defend herself. "Hello, is someone in there?" The voice was deep, unfamiliar with the slight drawl common to the territory. Hannah hesitated. This could be a trick. "Who's asking?" A pause. "Name's Zachary Tanner. I was tracking a stray heifer when I heard someone shouting. You sound like you're in a fix, madam." Hannah's grip on the pitchfork tightened. "Mr. Thornton locked me in here. He thinks I'll agree to marry him if he leaves me all night." She heard a low whistle followed by muttered curses. "That's Maxwell Thornton's doing. Man's more snake than banker." The voice grew closer to the door. "Stand back from the door, madam. I'll have you out in a minute." Hannah backed away, still clutching her makeshift weapon. She heard metallic scraping, then the sound of something heavy striking the padlock repeatedly. After several blows, a satisfying crack preceded the clatter of the broken lock hitting the ground. The door swung open, revealing a tall silhouette backlit by moonlight. Hannah raised the pitchfork defensively. "Whoa there," the man said, raising his hands. "Just here to help." As he stepped into what little light filtered through the shed's single dirty window, Hannah could make out a lean, weathered face beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Dust covered his denim pants and leather vest, and a holstered revolver hung at his hip. Not the polished appearance of the businessman she was accustomed to, but something about his steady gaze put her slightly at ease. "I appreciate the rescue, Mr. Tanner, but I'm still not convinced you're not one of Thornton's men." The cowboy chuckled, a warm sound that seemed genuine. "Miss, if I worked for that varmint, I wouldn't have just broken his property." He gestured to the shattered padlock. "Come on out. My horse is just yonder. I can take you somewhere safe." Hannah lowered the pitchfork slightly but didn't relinquish it. "How do I know where you'll take me?" Zachary sighed, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "Look, Miss Prescott, Hannah Prescott, "Miss Prescott, it's below freezing. You've been locked in a shed and we're on Thornton's land. I suggest we discuss trust issues somewhere warmer and less likely to get us both in trouble." Hannah considered her options. She could stay and wait for Thornton, whose intentions were clearly dishonorable, or she could take a chance on this stranger. The decision wasn't difficult. "Very well, Mr. Tanner. Lead the way." She set down the pitchfork but kept her hand near her concealed derringer. Outside, the full moon illuminated a vast landscape of rolling hills dusted with early winter frost. A large chestnut horse stood patiently nearby, steam rising from its nostrils in the cold air. "This is Buck," Zachary said, patting the horse's neck. "He's gentle but strong. He'll carry us both to town." Hannah eyed the single saddle dubiously. "Both of us?" "Unless you'd prefer I leave you with another horse and directions. Though I wouldn't recommend riding alone at night in these parts." Hannah sighed. "I suppose I don't have much choice." Zachary helped her mount, then swung up behind her with practiced ease. The proximity was improper by any standard Hannah had been raised with, but survival trumped propriety in this moment. "Hold tight," he advised, reaching around her to take the reins. "It's about an hour's ride to my cabin. We can figure out what to do from there." As they rode away from Thornton's property, Hannah found herself relaxing slightly against the solid warmth of the cowboy's chest. The rhythmic movement of the horse and the exhaustion of her ordeal made her eyelids heavy. "Stay awake, Miss Prescott," Zachary said softly near her ear. "Cold as it is, falling asleep might be dangerous." "Then talk to me," Hannah replied. "Tell me why you were tracking a heifer in the dark." Zachary adjusted his hold on the reins. "I manage the Double R Ranch for the Randall family. We lost some cattle in yesterday's snowfall. Found most, but one heifer went missing. Young thing, probably scared by wolves." "Did you find it?" "No," he admitted. "But I found you instead. Reckon that's more important." Hannah wasn't sure how to respond to that, so she changed the subject. "How long have you been in Montana?" "Born here," he replied. "My father trapped fur along the Missouri before settling down to ranch. Taught me everything I know about this land and its ways." He paused. "What about you?" "Your accent says East Coast." "Boston," Hannah confirmed. "I came west 6 months ago after my grandmother passed." "My condolences." "Thank you. She was the one who made it possible for me to come here, left me enough to purchase land." "Ah," Zachary said, understanding dawning in his voice. "That's why Thornton's interested. Single woman with property." Hannah stiffened. "I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs." "Never suggested otherwise," Zachary replied easily. "Just noting Thornton's motivations. Man's been buying up land all over the territory, some by means less than honorable." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the steady clop of Buck's hooves and the occasional cry of a night bird. The temperature continued to drop, and Hannah found herself instinctively leaning back for warmth. "Almost there," Zachary assured her as they crested a hill. In the valley below, Hannah could make out the dark shape of a cabin, a tendril of smoke rising from its chimney. "I thought you said you lived on the Double R. I manage it, but I keep my own place, like my privacy." There was something in his tone that discouraged further questions. As they approached the cabin, Hannah noticed it was modest but well-maintained. A small corral stood empty to one side, and a woodpile was neatly stacked against the western wall. Zachary dismounted first, then reached up to help Hannah down. Her legs were stiff from cold and the long ride, and she stumbled slightly as her feet touched the ground. His hand steadied her, strong and surprisingly gentle. "Easy there," he murmured before releasing her. He led Buck to a small stable attached to the cabin, leaving Hannah momentarily alone in the yard. She considered her situation. She was miles from town, alone with a man she'd just met, with no way to return home before morning. The proper thing would be to insist he take her to town immediately, regardless of the hour. But the thought of another hour on horseback in the freezing night was unbearable. Zachary returned, carrying his saddle. "Let's get you inside and warmed up. I've got coffee and some stew I can heat." The interior of the cabin was simple but comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its embers still glowing. A table and 2 chairs stood in one corner, a bed in another, and a small kitchen area occupied the remaining space. Everything was surprisingly neat. Zachary immediately set to building up the fire. "Make yourself comfortable, Miss Prescott. You're safe here." Hannah remained standing near the door, suddenly acutely aware of the impropriety of the situation. "Mr. Tanner, I appreciate your assistance, but I cannot stay the night in an unmarried man's home." Zachary looked up from the fire, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Madam, I understand your concern, but it's 15 miles to town and the temperature's still dropping. I can sleep in the stable if it eases your mind." Hannah felt a flush of embarrassment. "I didn't mean to suggest, no offense taken." He stood, dusting off his hands. "But my offer stands. Take the bed, I'll take the stable." Before Hannah could respond, a sharp gust of wind rattled the cabin shutters, bringing with it the first flakes of fresh snow. Zachary moved to the window. "Storm's coming in faster than expected." He turned back to Hannah, his expression grave. "Looks like we're both staying put until morning one way or another." Hannah sighed, finally removing her coat. "I suppose I have little choice but to accept your hospitality, Mr. Tanner." "Zach," he corrected, moving to the kitchen area. "If we're going to be snowbound, might as well use first names." As he busied himself heating a pot on the small cast iron stove, Hannah took the opportunity to examine her rescuer more closely. In the growing firelight, she could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 28 or 30. His face was tanned from outdoor work, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often. There was a small scar near his right temple, partially hidden by his hair. "Hope you like venison stew," he said, stirring the pot. "Shot the deer myself last week." "I'm sure it's fine," Hannah replied, though in truth she'd rarely eaten game back in Boston. "Can I help with anything?" Zach seemed surprised by the offer. "There are bowls on that shelf, if you don't mind setting the table." They worked in companionable silence, the domestic routine bringing a strange sense of normalcy to the extraordinary circumstances. When they finally sat down to eat, Hannah realized how ravenous she was. The stew was surprisingly good, rich and flavorful. "This is delicious," she admitted after several bites. Zach looked pleased. "My mother's recipe. She taught me to cook before she passed." "I'm sorry about your mother," he nodded in acknowledgement. "It was years ago. Influenza took her and my little sister both in '69. That must have been difficult." "It was. My father never quite recovered, started drinking heavily. That's why I left home at 16, found work as a ranch hand." He took a sip of coffee. "What about your family?" "Besides your grandmother, I mean." Hannah hesitated, then decided honesty was the simplest approach. "My mother died when I was born. My father is a businessman in Boston, wholly devoted to his shipping company and social standing. When I refused to marry his choice of husband, a man old enough to be my father, he threatened to disown me. My grandmother's inheritance gave me the means to leave." "Brave thing to do," Zach commented. "Coming west alone." "Or foolish," Hannah said with a small smile. "Today's events suggest the latter." Zach shook his head. "Thornton's actions aren't your fault. Men like that are why decent women need to be cautious out here." "Yet you've been nothing but honorable," Hannah observed. Don't go making me out to be some kind of saint, Zach replied, a hint of darkness crossing his features. I've made my share of mistakes. Before Hannah could inquire further, a howling gust of wind slammed against the cabin, making the shutters bang. Outside, the snow was falling heavily now, creating a white curtain visible through the window. Storm's setting in for the night, Zach said, standing to clear their empty bowls. Best get some rest. Morning will come soon enough. Despite her exhaustion, Hannah found herself reluctant to take his bed. I can sleep by the fire. There's no need for you to go to the stable. Wouldn't be proper, Zach insisted. Neither is any of this, Hannah pointed out. But circumstances being what they are, I think we can make reasonable accommodations. The floor near the fire will be perfectly comfortable for me. Zach studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I've got some extra blankets. We'll make you a pallet. As they arranged bedding near the hearth, their hands accidentally brushed. Hannah felt an unexpected jolt at the contact and quickly withdrew her hand, hoping the firelight hid her blush. Thank you, she said simply when they finished. For everything. Zach nodded, retreating to his bed on the opposite side of the room. Sleep well, Hannah. Despite her extraordinary day, Hannah fell asleep almost immediately, lulled by the crackling fire and the soft sounds of Zach's breathing across the room. She awoke to bright sunlight filtering through the cabin's windows. The storm had passed, leaving a pristine blanket of snow covering the landscape. Zach was already up, his bed empty and neatly made. The smell of coffee and frying bacon filled the small space. Morning, he greeted from the stove. Sleep all right. Hannah sat up, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. She ran her fingers through her tangled hair. Better than I expected to, thank you. Breakfast was a simple affair of bacon, biscuits, and strong coffee, but Hannah couldn't remember when food had tasted better. As they ate, Zach outlined a plan. We should head to town first, report what Thornton did. Sheriff Daniels is a fair man. Then I can escort you home if you'd like. Hannah nodded, though a strange reluctance to end their time together had begun to form in her chest. That seemed sensible. The ride to Wolf Creek took longer than usual due to the fresh snow. This time, Hannah was more comfortable with the shared saddle arrangement, though she remained acutely aware of Zach's proximity. They talked easily about their lives, his work at the ranch, her plans for her small farm, books they'd both enjoyed. By the time the town came into view, Hannah felt she'd known him far longer than a mere day. Sheriff Daniels listened gravely to Hannah's account of Thornton's actions. Not the first complaint I've had about that man, he admitted, scratching his grizzled beard, but it's the most serious. I'll have a deputy ride out and bring him in for questioning. Will charges be filed? Hannah asked. The sheriff sighed. That depends. Man like Thornton has friends in the territorial court, but unlawful imprisonment is serious. We'll do what we can, Miss Prescott. After filing the official report, Zach accompanied Hannah to the general store to purchase supplies she'd need for the next few days. News traveled fast in small towns, and Hannah noticed curious glances and whispered conversations following them. Your reputation might suffer from this, Zach said quietly as they left the store. People will talk about you spending the night at my cabin. Hannah lifted her chin. Let them talk. I know the truth, as do you. His smile was warm. You're not like most women I've met, Hannah Prescott. I'll take that as a compliment, she replied. The ride to Hannah's homestead took another hour. Her small cabin came into view, nestled against a stand of pine trees. A chicken coop and modest barn stood nearby, with a fenced garden plot now dormant for winter. It's not much, she said, suddenly self-conscious, but it's mine. It's a fine place, Zach said approvingly as he helped her down from Buck. Good water source protected from the north wind. Hannah hesitated as he handed her the parcels from town. "Would you like to come in for coffee? It's the least I can offer after everything." Zach glanced at the son's position. "I should be getting back. Mr. Randall will be wondering where I disappeared to." "Of course," Hannah said, trying to hide her disappointment. "Thank you again for rescuing me." He tipped his hat, about to mount, then seemed to change his mind. "Maybe I could call on you proper like sometime. Sunday after church, perhaps?" A warm feeling spread through Hannah's chest. "I'd like that very much." The days that followed were filled with a nervous anticipation Hannah hadn't experienced before. She cleaned her cabin thoroughly, baked bread, and even splurged on a new ribbon for her hair at the general store. When Sunday arrived, she wore her best dress, a blue calico that brought out her eyes. True to his word, Zach appeared at her door following the morning service, hat in hand and wearing a clean shirt. He'd brought flowers, wild columbines he'd found sheltered in a canyon. That Sunday visit became a weekly tradition. They would walk her property line, discussing improvements she wanted to make. Zach taught her about the local wildlife and plants, while Hannah shared stories from her life in Boston. Sometimes they simply sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in spectacular colors. As winter deepened, their friendship blossomed into something more. The first time Zach kissed her was after helping her repair her chicken coop during a rare warm day in January. It was gentle and questioning at first, then deeper as Hannah responded with unexpected passion. By spring, the entire community recognized them as a couple. Thornton had been forced to leave the territory after multiple complaints came to light following Hannah's ordeal. His departure left the banking position open, which was filled by a fair-minded man from Helena who approved Hannah's loan for farming equipment without hesitation. With Zach's help, Hannah planted her first crops in May. The work was hard but satisfying. On warm evenings, they would sit side by side on her porch swing, planning future harvests and sharing dreams. It was on such an evening, with fireflies beginning to dance in the twilight, that Zach took her hand. "Hannah, I've been thinking about something important." Her heart quickened at his serious tone. "Yes, this past winter, finding you in that shed, it was the luckiest accident of my life." He shifted to face her directly. "I know you came west to be independent, and I respect that more than I can say, but I've fallen in love with you, Hannah Prescott." Hannah's breath caught. Though she'd known in her heart how she felt, neither had spoken the words aloud until now. "I love you too," she whispered. Zach smiled, then reached into his pocket. "I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment." He produced a simple gold band. "It was my mother's. I'd be honored if you'd wear it as my wife." Hannah looked at the ring, then into Zach's hopeful eyes. "Are you certain marriage would mean changes for both of us?" "The only thing I'm certain of is that I want to build a life with you," he replied. "We could combine our efforts, your land, my experience. Equal partners in all things." The proposition was unlike any marriage arrangement Hannah had known in Boston, where wives became property along with their dowries. "Equal partners," she repeated, tasting the words. "I think I'd like that very much." Their wedding in June was a community affair. The entire town turned out to celebrate, bringing food, music, and well wishes. Sheriff Daniels gave Hannah away, and Mrs. Randall, Zach's employer's wife, stood as matron of honor. That night, in Hannah's cabin, now their cabin, they came together as husband and wife, discovering each other with tender passion that deepened their connection beyond what either had imagined possible. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Their farm prospered under their combined efforts. Hannah's determined spirit and Zach's practical knowledge complemented each other perfectly. 2 years after their wedding, They welcomed twins, a boy and a girl, who inherited their father's smile and their mother's determination. On the 5th anniversary of the night Zach had broken the lock on Thornton's shed, they sat together on their expanded porch, watching their children play in the yard. "You ever think about how differently things might have gone?" Hannah asked, leaning against her husband's shoulder. "If you hadn't been tracking that lost heifer that night," Zach's arm tightened around her. "Sometimes. But then I think maybe it wasn't chance at all. Maybe I was meant to find you." Hannah smiled, thinking of the frightened but resolute woman she'd been, locked in that cold shed. How far she'd come since then, not just in finding love, but in building exactly the life she'd dreamed of when she'd first journeyed west. "Either way," she said, turning to kiss him softly, "I'm grateful every day for that broken lock." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant orange and pink, Hannah reflected that some locks were meant to be broken like the ones that had once constrained her to society's expectations. In their place, she had forged new bonds of love, partnership, and family that were stronger than any chain or padlock ever made. And as their children ran laughing toward them, calling for one more story before bedtime, Hannah knew with absolute certainty that these were bonds she would cherish for all her days.